Welcome to the channel. So in this video, I want to talk about why having knowledge about a sport isn't enough by itself to make wise decisions in the sports card space. Let's get into this. When people first get involved with the hobby, oftentimes the thing that drew them in is their love for sports. It makes sense. I mean, why are you going to go and collect or open basketball packs unless you actually like basketball? You know, I for myself found that I was trying for a while to get a little bit more involved in like NFL football kind of spaces, and I realized, as this might be sacrilegious to some of you, I don't really like football. I've never really, I've always tried to follow it a little bit. I've always had friends who've enjoyed it, so I've tried to follow it a little bit, but I get bored when I watch the games. They stretch on. There's so much like just waiting time in between the plays. I just feel like I get bored watching football, and the games are so long. I'm just like, let's watch basketball. I love basketball. I want to play basketball. Basketball's fun, and it's stuff is happening, and I can recognize like the different strategies people. I just like basketball, so it makes sense that I'm going to collect basketball cards. So, you know, in general, I think people who step into the sports card space are stepping into a sport that they like and that they find interesting and that they have some knowledge in some way or another. And a lot of people will think that that knowledge of that sport is the thing that's going to help them to navigate the sports card market in a wise way and to make wise decisions, especially related to value, you know, whether somebody's value is going to go up and down. And you can even see that in the content creator space. This player is going to have an excellent season, so he's a good buy or something like this. But it's more complex. Understanding the nature of the sports card market is much more complex than understanding the sport itself. The state of the economy has more say on the movement of sports card values than the sport itself does. Psychology and the way people think about things has more effect on sports card value than the sport itself does. These things are not necessarily what people who are stepping into the sports card space because of interest in sports are thinking about. And it can affect the decision making they have. You know, for example, when I talk about macroeconomics, this is very clearly understood at this point now, I think, by people who have been in the sports card space and who were there during the spike, you know, with all the extra money that was coming into the sports card world because of the stimulus checks, and have been in this space, you know, as the economy has been having a hard time recently. They can see very clearly the effects of the macroeconomic factors on the sports card world. And it's not something that a new person stepping into the space necessarily thinks about, but it has a massive effect. I don't know, back in the days of Beckett magazine, if the macroeconomic factors had an effect on the Beckett magazine values. I don't really know. I don't know what caused that. I don't know if it was more just related to the sports themselves, or I don't really know how they came up with those, but I suspect that macroeconomic factors were still a factor, but maybe a smaller one, whereas nowadays macroeconomic factors are maybe the biggest effect. I mean, they have more effect. If the economy was going wonderful and everybody had excessive money, the sports card market all the values would be going up and everything, most likely. You know, so the macroeconomic factors have a big effect. So a lot of people, when they step into this space, they don't necessarily want to become an economist. That's not their interest. That's not the reason they came into sports cards. You know, oftentimes people come into sports cards as an escape from the more serious things of life, and they don't want to have to step into the space and think about the macroeconomic factors. But if they don't, and they're trying to like, you know, make some moves and make some plays in the sports card market space, they're going to be making some mistakes. You know, they could make decisions that from a sports standpoint are excellent decisions and still end up losing money if that's what their goal is. You know, you can see examples of it all over the place. I mean, almost any card that you would have bought, you know, 2 years ago has gone down, even if the player has become much better. There's exceptions for sure. Let's say, I don't know, let's take an example in basketball of like Anthony Edwards. Anthony Edwards is great. You know, I think he's the best player from that draft class, I would say, by far. I mean, I don't think LaMelo Ball is even number 2. So, you know, I think Anthony Edwards is the best player from that draft class. You know, you have Maxey, you have Halliburton. Those were 2 guys that I think I did a good job. I was on those guys early on. And maybe if you got on early on enough, maybe some of those cards have gone up from a Maxey or a Halliburton. You know, some of those cards have gone up. But because of the macroeconomic factors, most of them haven't. Most of them have still gone down, despite the fact that these players have kind of proven themselves to be amazing players. You know, a Maxey, a Halliburton, you know, maybe there's certain cards that have gone up in value from their early years. It's totally I know that some have. I've made a decent amount of money on selling Maxi and Halliburton cards. But at the same time, because of the macroeconomic factors, the basketball factors are only a small portion of that space. And most of their cards have gone down or stayed even or went down and maybe came up a little bit from a hype cycle, but are probably going to go back down once the hype cycle is over. So you have to kind of understand the flow of how the macroeconomic factors affect sports cards in order to make good decisions. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is psychology. And that you can see through hype cycles. When people get really like, this is going to be the next hot thing. This is going to be the next hot thing. It doesn't matter what's happening in actual basketball world yet. It's the potential of what could happen that causes the spike. And then even if that person meets that expectation, meets that hype, eventually that's going to come down. You could see some examples of, let's say, you have a player coming, Victor Wembanyama. Let's take somebody like Victor Wembanyama. He has got massive amounts of hype. When he gets more and more sports cards into the sports card market, I'm sure his values are going to be astronomical. They already are in unlicensed stuff and in, these Bowman University things, and they're already astronomically high. His hype is so massive. He completely could meet the hype. It's totally possible. He could even exceed the hype. Even if he did that, his cards are still going to come down in value because of psychology. People don't have the attention span to keep that level of hype lasting for so long that he could be the greatest player in the history of the NBA and his cards will still come down in value from the initial hype. It's psychology. Just the way that people work. They don't have the attention span to keep that going consistently. Maybe he's a good buy at some points. That's why, I hear a lot of people say it's not about who you buy, what cards you buy, what sports players you're buying into. It's about when you buy. What is your knowledge of the market? What is your knowledge of psychology, of how humans think when they're more, when the hype cycle is going to take hold, and are you willing to try to get rid of things at that moment? For example, for me, during the off season, this past off season, I bought a ton of Shade and Sharp cards because part of it is I'm a Blazer fan. Part of it is I have a Shade and Sharp collection. He's one of the newer players that I started collecting last year. I really like him. He's so fun to watch, and I just think he's great. And I thought his cards were undervalued, in the off season. So I was buying up a ton, especially from China, because, modern cards in China sell for a lot cheaper. I was buying up a ton. I bought autograph cards. I bought like case hit cards. I spent way more money on Shade and Sharp than I've spent on anybody in a while, actually. And I've been selling them like crazy. People are just starting to realize, oh, this guy might be something. And, for some people, they might be like, oh, he might be something. I'm going to hold on to this card. I'm going to hold on and see what happens in 2 years, see what happens in 3 years. I'm more of the mindset is like, people are realizing it. There's a hype spike. I want to sell it at the hype spike. Maybe there'll be another hype spike on down the road later, but based on psychology, based on what I've seen in the past, there will be a hype spike, and then no matter how he plays, that will fall down again, and his values will go down again. And then maybe later there'll be more hype spikes. Who knows? I can't read that far down the future. It's impossible for anybody to know what's going to happen on down the future. But I do know if there's a hype spike happening right now, that that this is a good moment to sell. So I'm like, okay, I'm trying to list all of my Shade and Sharp cards, and they're selling like hotcakes. Really, they are. I sold a Donruss Choice Auto like 3 days ago for like double the price I bought it. I sold I've sold like a bunch of like $20, Court Kings Acetate or Fast Break Prism Variation, a bunch of these like $20 type of cards. Sold a bunch of them just in since the NBA season has started, and I am not holding them. I'm like, okay, get rid of anything I can right now because he's having a moment. I want to sell stuff while he's having a moment. I've done very well. If I want to recollect some of that stuff later for my PC, I know these cards are not rare. I can find them again. So if I really do want them, I feel very confident that these cards are going to eventually come back down, and I can pick and choose some other ones that I want to keep for myself. I just think it's the way it works. There's hype spikes, and then people forget. Even if they get playing amazingly for years, they get forgotten by the psychology of humans who only, have a certain amount of headline stories that seem to be in their minds related to sports. Part of maybe that's more of because of the headline culture that we have nowadays, where people don't have the attention span to stay focused on somebody's career for the entire 10 years very often. They just see the moments, and whatever gets up into people's minds more frequently for a period of time goes up here, and then no matter how they're playing later, it goes back down again. So because of that kind of psychological effect, I feel like that helps you make decisions in the sports card market even more than having sports knowledge does. I mean, you need to combine all these things, really. I mean, none of these are factors by themselves. You can't just understand macroeconomics and you'll make good decisions. You can't just understand psychology and you make good decisions. You can't just understand the sports themselves and make good decisions. You can't just understand the historical patterns in the sports card market and make good decisions. You kind of need all of those things combined to make wise decisions. And I think it's something that we don't talk about enough. I mean, I think especially with new people stepping into the hobby, I think these are areas that they should have, like, be oriented to early on. You know, if somebody makes a video and says, sports cards 101, these are the things you need to know. I mean, sure, you can say, okay, Prism, Optic, and Select tend to do a little better than Chronicles and Contenders or whatever. Like, there's some basic knowledge like that you can tell people, even though I don't necessarily know if that is actually true. That what I just said just there, even though it seems to be like common knowledge that people talk about, I don't necessarily think I 100% agree with it, because it kind of, there's more nuance to it. But I do think at the deeper thing, the thing that people should really be oriented into is those kinds of things, like to understand that value is based on supply and demand, and supply and demand is based on a lot more than just sports knowledge. That there's all these different elements. So maybe I should be making a sports card 101 video that talks about those types of things. I don't know. Maybe I have. I don't know. I've made so many videos at this point. I don't even know what I've talked about anymore. But I'm sure some people have done that. But I do think that some of these bigger platforms that are a big stepping stone into this space, into the sports card hobby for a lot of people, like Sports Card Investor Channel or something like that. I do think it would be wise for them to have this sort of thing more centrally focused in helping people who are stepping into the sports card space for the first time to think through these types of factors, because I don't think it's discussed enough until you're in the space more deeply. Once you're in the space more deeply, I think you come to realize a lot of this, and you come to understand this in a bigger way, and maybe that's what it requires. Maybe it requires a little bit more like involvement in the space, but I do think it's something that people should be kind of oriented into earlier in their sports card journey, just so they don't make some early mistakes. I mean, it's if you're starting off making small decisions, making small purchases, just to kind of learn what this space is all about, like, maybe you'll figure it out. But I feel like a lot of this is stuff that should be common knowledge, and that maybe has become a little bit more common knowledge through the crash that has not exactly crash. I don't like calling it that, but the recorrection or whatever you want to call it. I feel like it has become generally more common knowledge for people who have been here during this span of time. But I think it's, we have to realize that people stepping into this space won't have that as common knowledge, and should have opportunities to be oriented into this kind of awareness early on, so that they can make some good decisions. And so we can all have a market that's a little bit more predictable, that's a little bit more logical, that's a little bit more understood. So anyway, that's just my thoughts on it. So hope you enjoyed the video. I will see you in the next video. Peace.